everyone realizes within the Dogecoin community, I think this is different than some other communities. Everyone is fully aware that the only reason why this has value is because we all agree it does. But this is the same with Bitcoin and every single other currency ever issued, including gold-backed currencies.
This episode is brought to you by Uphold, which is one of the top crypto platforms in the industry. I've been a user of Uphold since 2018. They make it easy to buy, sell, and trade crypto. They have 300 plus cryptocurrencies on their platform, which includes Bitcoin and all the top altcoins. And folks, they do not commingle. They do not lend out your funds. They are 100% reserved, and you can review their transparency report. And they have a lot of great features that make it easy to execute your trades. They also have a great new product called USD interest accounts, which allows you to park your dry powder or your crypto profits and earn up to 4.9% APY. Now, the 4.9% APY is only on balances over $1,000. Below 1,000, it's 2%. But what's great about this product, guys, is there's no lockups, there's no monthly fees, there's no subscriptions, and best of all, it is FDIC insured just like a bank. So if you'd like to learn more about Uphold, visit the link in the description. Welcome to the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and with me today is Carter Feldman, who's the founder and CEO of QED Protocol. Carter, great to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me, Tony.
Carter, I'm excited to speak with you. As I mentioned before the recording, you guys are building some incredible solutions to help scale Bitcoin and Dogecoin. And when I read that, I was like, wait a minute, I gotta get you on because this is fascinating. And the solutions and the use cases you're enabling for these assets is pretty incredible. But before we get there, tell us about yourself. Where are you from and what's your professional background?
For sure. So I'm from Chicago. As like a teenager, I was a relatively well-known video game hacker. So I was one of the prominent hackers within like the Call of Duty scene. I was member of I don't want to say a criminal gang, but a gang of sorts called Xbox Underground, which, we got some press coverage about that a while ago. But basically, we were the only ones who could run modified games on Xbox Live. So we sort of monopolized the Xbox Live cheating world. And then I was in charge of Call of Duty exploit development, which was like our largest money source since, back in the days on Xbox 360. Your Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, Black Ops 2, all of those were sort of the main revenue generators and the main group of players that wanted to cheat. So I come from more of a computer security background, a little bit of reverse engineering. But even then, I sort of had some exposure to crypto just because, I'm a libertarian kind of guy, and that always meshed very well with my worldview. After that, I went to college for a semester, dropped out, worked at a startup, eventually moved to China. I started a great esports company. It was at the time called V5. We later merged within a European esports company called NIP. We actually recently listed on the NASDAQ, $ NIPG. So I'm still on the board there, but all of my sort of day-to-day stuff is spent on QED. Although I do have to add a shout out to EOS. Back in the heyday of EOS, which you may remember, I ran a block producer called EOS Rapid. So we were a top 21 block producer for several years, had over $1 billion US stake to us. But I think it was then that I sort of saw some of the pitfalls of proof of stake, which later made me want to convert and start to see, can we actually build stuff on these older proof of work chains that are more secure, but, don't really have the same smart contract infrastructure that we would see something on like an Ethereum or an EOS. Yeah, that's my short background.
That's incredible, man. And congrats on the success with the company that you started and got listed on the NASDAQ and so forth. And you have a fascinating background, but it makes sense that you would end up in crypto because of your tech affinity. What was the first encounter for you, and when did it click for you for Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever it may be? When did you have that aha moment?
So I used to do some programming work as a child, and I would use my dad's PayPal account. And there was a period where suddenly my PayPal account got frozen, and I couldn't access my funds. Like I was doing like web development, sort of like I wasn't making a ton of money, but as like a freshman in high school, it was still good money. I'm making more than I would, working at McDonald's or something.
Right.
So and the account got frozen because someone disputed a transaction, and I had been, I delivered the work, but someone just decided to dispute, and then all of the funds that I had earned were locked up. Now, I think PayPal, by the way, I don't want to trash PayPal. I just have to say that because PayPal's doing amazing stuff in crypto. This was way back in the day. But
Right.
that kind of made me think, like this is not fair. And it's very strange that some centralized entity can just decide to take my money away. And that was way back when. If we fast forward to now, our reliance on these like digital services and on these big internet companies has gotten much, much worse in terms of like dependency,
Mm.
meaning that they have the ability to radically change parts of our lives with the stroke of a pen. Even just some random employee of any of these platforms can,
Wow.
if someone wants, for some of these Instagram influencers, their account is their whole life. And if their account went away, their life would be over. They would have to start from scratch. And I guess that sort of thoughts and seeing the trends of where society was going and moving more digital made me think like, oh shit, this is I don't know if I can curse. I apologize for that.
Again.
But yeah, it made me think like, oh my gosh, we need something better. And crypto seemed like the only viable alternative to that.
Mm. So did you then jump
I
to
was a Mt. Gox user, by the way. This is
wow.
way back. Yeah,
You're an OG man. I mean, a Mount Gox user and
relatively so.
yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we traded, like, I used to also do virtual. So I was reverse engineering video games. So we interacted a lot with some of those, like, paid gold, like the sort of, you can buy WoW gold, like some of these kinds of websites, which is this is sort of the culture that spawned Mt. Gox. I'm
Mm.
not sure if you know, but like Mt. Gox actually used to be a Magic the Gathering
Yeah.
trading website,
Yeah.
right? And then they did like some e-game stuff. Way back in the I don't want to say some of the websites, but yeah, so I've been around for a while.
That's awesome. So what led, you from going from gaming, which was seemed to be your passion back then, to, what, I'm going to build a solution in crypto to help scale Bitcoin and Dogecoin.
So it's kind of a longer process because I joined crypto again to when I was running EOS, block producers. And the reason why I did that though is the same as why I eventually got into ZK, which is that
Mm.
I wanted to see blockchain scale to a point where we can build real applications that people like to use, like normal things other than payments or like the DeFis of the world, things that normal people would use on, a daily basis.
Mm.
But I saw that the way that crypto was architected, specifically if we look at like Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's the serial state machine where we can only process like something like 20 30 transactions per second, and that prevented all of these applications that I thought were very important to become decentralized from becoming decentralized. And that's why I did EOS because it was more scalable than Ethereum, and then later got ZK built and came on the ZK bandwagon, eventually delivered it to Bitcoin and Dogecoin. But coming from the perspective of a reverse engineer who my job in high school was basically to cheat the system and give you, for instance, weapons that you didn't actually unlock,
Mm.
right? Or give you in-game currency on Black Ops. I don't know if you remember in Call of
Yeah.
Duty Black Ops,
I used to
there was
play that. Yeah.
right? COD points, right? I could give you like 2 to the 31 -1 COD points, right? Immediately. And reflecting on the decisions I made as a child, which I admit were probably not very ethical, it would be very nice to be able to build games and other digital services that weren't vulnerable to being hacked. Like you can't just like reverse engineer Ethereum and like suddenly give yourself a million USDT,
Right.
right? And I think that's sort of like I wanted to create a solution to, I guess, like repay my debt to society for the malfeasances of my youth. But yeah, no, ultimately I just want to build a more decentralized internet, and that's really what drove me into like wanting to build on Bitcoin and Dogecoin, just because again, I saw the security pitfalls with EOS. We can go into that if you want. There's some interesting stories like reverse transactions, exchanges doing some manipulation on the validator side. But maybe we shouldn't get into that. Now, you worked at OKCoin, right? Before I read. So you're at OKX before. OKX was one of my biggest supporters. I love them because they didn't get involved in like the politics or the decision-making process. They were like purely financially driven. Like they wanted a little bit of a kickback, the OK pool, which all of the voters eventually did. That's how like staking works on EOS and the way that you get yield. But yeah, like the reason why Bitcoin and Dogecoin is just because they were proof of work, and I knew that there wouldn't like the future of the internet can't be controlled by an oligopoly because like it currently is. So if we switch out your Amazons, your Facebooks for like exchange controlled proof of stake kind of, blockchains, then it's not that much better, right? We're just going from one group of hands to another group of hands, sort of controlling in the background. So, but yeah, Bitcoin and Dogecoin are kind of the only big chains that still have that super hardcore, very secure proof of work, security trust chain or attack surface.
So on that note, a follow-up question with proof of stake. I've read up about what you're saying, right? Where it's just creating a monopoly for certain folks again. Um, and I'm wondering, what's the solution here? Is it what you're doing, right? That we don't focus so much on these proof of stake tokens or networks, or there is a solution, but maybe they won't adopt it. I don't know if that question makes sense.
Sure. So it's like proof of work is an alternative to proof of stake that's very secure. And we know it powers the most secure blockchain in the world.
Right.
The problem is that it's a little bit slow. With proof of stake, the reason why it's faster is because when I'm executing a bunch of transactions, I know who the next validator is going to be, right? So I can do that handoff very quickly, and I don't have to go through a bunch of intermediaries. In addition, we don't have to have these kind of random challenges where, on Bitcoin, it takes like 10 minutes, but there's variability there. So it's a little bit less consistent. And what that means is that the number of transactions that you can relay, because you don't know who's going to be the next person, decreases because you have to send the transactions to everyone. Versus with a proof of stake validator-based blockchain, you just have to make sure that all those transactions get to the next person, right? The next person who's going to be producing a block. So if we have a gigabyte worth of transactions, or even like 100 megabytes, if I have to send 100 megabytes to everyone versus sending 100 megabytes to one person, obviously it's much easier and faster to ensure that that one person gets it versus having to, have everyone receive every transaction immediately. We do send every transaction to everyone on Bitcoin. It's just that it takes a little bit longer. So, but proof of stake was created to try to solve blockchain scaling by trading off a little bit of centralization for better performance, right? What we're doing on Dogecoin and Bitcoin is leveraging ZK to get even more performance with no security trade-offs. And I don't know how much folks know about ZK. I know it's been kind of like a hot buzzword.
Right.
So maybe we can go into that if you think your audience would be curious.
Yeah, I think we can talk
really
about
cool.
zero knowledge proofs, zero knowledge rollups, and all that, the concepts behind that, and then how you guys are leveraging that specifically.
Yeah, so like just to sort of zoom out a little bit, the way that current blockchains works that aren't powered by ZK is every single transaction that anyone submits to the blockchain needs to be validated and ran on every single node. So every time I broadcast an Ethereum transaction, I transfer some USDT, every single Ethereum full node runs that transaction. And then the way that we arrive at consensus is by comparing with each other to make sure that everyone got the same result. So as long as the majority of people, are running and validating the transactions correctly, we'll be able to arrive at a fair consensus, right? That's sort of the idea. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that if you want to run too many transactions, right? Let's say there's a backlog of 1 million transactions, right? If I'm running an Ethereum node on my, $20 a month server, it's not going to be able to run those transactions as fast as a really big, beefy server cluster. So if we have big, beefy server clusters running the validators, the nodes that are like, I guess, less performant or aren't as expensive, the cheaper servers that normal people maybe would be able to run, those guys can't keep up with those big validators. So they're going to be on transaction 10, finishing processing that, while the big servers already processed 1 million transactions, right? Which means that, like, as we increase the TPS of these traditional blockchains, the number of nodes that can keep up decreases, right? Because the more expensive of a server you need to run an Ethereum node, the fewer Ethereum nodes there will be, right? Because not everyone is willing to fork out that much cash to run a super big Ethereum node. Now, Ethereum also is a serial state machine, and we can get into that, but that's sort of the core problem with existing blockchains, which is just that every single node needs to run every single transaction, because the more nodes that validate a transaction on a given chain, the more secure the chain is. And I think we can agree on that, right? The more nodes check in to make sure there's no fraud going on, the harder it is to sort of rig the thing, right? Because if there's only 2 nodes, I just have to bribe those 2 nodes to, like, transfer me all of your, Ethereum or all of your USDT, and then maybe they'll do it. But if there's thousands and thousands of nodes, then it's really hard for me to, sort of create a conspiracy amongst those folks. With ZK, though, it does this really incredible thing where I can prove 1 million transactions on a beefy server, right? And then I can send the cheaper nodes a proof that all of those transactions were valid. And the time it takes for those, lighter nodes or those, cheaper servers to validate my proof doesn't depend on the number of transactions that were included in the proof. So it takes a millisecond to verify all 1 million of those transactions on my phone, right? And if it's 1 billion transactions or 10 million transactions or 5 transactions, the time it takes to verify the proof is exactly the same. So we can build blockchains where every single node validates each transaction, but where the time it takes to validate each transaction actually doesn't depend on the number of transactions that were included in a block. So you lower that barrier to entry for nodes and increase the scalability, right? You can increase the scalability of a chain without decreasing its, decentralization by way of increasing the difficulty of running a node, right? So in addition, what you can do is, before, when we wanted to scale something by sharding, right, which is a common term that a lot of people probably hear, and all that means is that if we have 1,000 transactions waiting in the mempool, waiting to be included in a block, 1,000 people all click the button in a dApp, we send 500 of those transactions to one node, or a group of nodes, and we send the other 500 transactions to another group of nodes, right? So those cohorts process in parallel those 500 transactions, right? Now, the problem with that, of course, is just that the number of nodes which validate each transaction decreases by half, right? If we split the 1,000 transactions, in 2 groups, and we have 1,000 nodes, we've gone from 1,000 nodes validating each transaction to 500 nodes validating each transaction, right? So these kind of scaling methods don't work unless you have zero-knowledge proofs. Because what you can do is you can instead take 500 of those transactions, send them to one node. That node will generate a proof. Take the other 500 transactions, send it to one node, have them generate a proof, and then send everyone 2 proofs, which again takes only 2 milliseconds to do. And then every node can still validate every single transaction, right? So if we have 1,000 nodes, they still have 1,000 nodes checking each transaction. And the really cool thing, the thing that we're doing at QED, is that, you can split up into, 500 per proof or whatever, but you still have this problem where the more groups that you split up into, let's say we have 10,000 transactions. If we split it up into groups of 500, right, we end up with 20 proofs, right? So the number of proofs starts to add up, right? If we have 1,000 proofs, now we're talking about waiting a whole second. If we have 10,000 proofs, now it's 10 seconds. 60,000 proofs, a minute. 600,000, now we're talking about 10 minutes. So that starts to run away. But another thing we can do is we can first split it up into groups, right? Have maybe 10 transactions in each proof. And then what we can do is we can take those proofs and batch them into groups of 2 and generate a proof which validates 2 other proofs, right? So the number of proofs that each node has to check to validate all the transactions in the block decreases by half. And then we do that again. And now it's decreased by a fourth. And we continue doing this until we have one single proof that proves all of the transactions in the block. But again, we're still able to massively parallelize this. So on QED, the users actually prove their own transactions. And what you send to the network is a zero knowledge proof. And then we build a tree out of those proofs, which we can do in what's called O of log n time, which is just a funny math way of saying this process of dividing the number of proofs that everyone has to check by 2 until we have one proof left, right? And that one proof proves all of the transactions from all of the users in the block. And then we send that proof off to Bitcoin and Dogecoin and other places, but we love our Bitcoin and Dogecoin because they're proof of work. And it gets checked on there. So every Dogecoin and Bitcoin node checks that proof. So we can inherit the security of Bitcoin, meaning, and again, what does Bitcoin security means? It means the only way to break the chain or steal funds on a layer 2 is if you break Bitcoin's own security. So if the only way that you can break a layer 2 on Bitcoin is by implementing a hack or doing something which would allow you to steal Bitcoin directly on layer 1, then that layer 2 has Bitcoin security. These terms do get thrown around a lot. I'm sure I don't know how tapped in you've been with the Bitcoin ecosystem, but there's a lot of folks talking about Bitcoin security where there's attacks that you could perform on them that would not compromise Bitcoin itself. But we don't do that. We don't do that kind of false advertising. Don't want to say any names, but I'm sure some of the folks in the audience have heard an earful of that. But that's kind of how this works, and that's why we get buzzwords from time to time in blockchain. But this is a really special one, again, because it solves that problem of having to have every single node validate each transaction and the amount of work that each node has to do depending on the number of transactions in the block. It totally removes that problem. And it lets us apply these O of log n based scaling techniques that we sort of see in Web 2 come to Web 3. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. And on your website, I noticed that the consensus mechanism, is proof of math. Can you explain that? Or I don't know if you touched on it already. Yeah.
So the validity of transactions is proved by proof of math. So what that means is that these zero knowledge proofs, when I prove that these 10 million transactions were valid, and that resulted in a state change of what's called the Merkle root of the chain from one root to a new root, which you can use to prove any of the state information. We're actually generating a mathematical proof that all those transactions were legit. So there's no consensus in terms of, we need the majority of people to be honest, or we need lots of people to check it. No, the math, all you have to do is trust the math that underlies the proof system. And if you verify the proof, you mathematically can be certain that all of those proofs were legit and all of the transactions in the block were valid. So it's very different than a scheme where it's like, because these people are incentivized not to lie, right? Therefore, all the transactions are going to be A-OK. If I come to you and I say, I can mathematically prove that those transactions are legit, I would hope that yourself and the audience would, we trust math. Math is good, right? Math is very hard to cheat. You can't really cheat at math. So yeah, it's that's why we say proof of math. Like we have T-shirts that say the only proof I trust is proof of math. Of course, we trust Bitcoin proof of work too.
For sure.
Yeah, that's the whole thing with proof of math.
So QED protocol is a layer 2, sits on top Dogecoin and Bitcoin. What does it enable? What features and use cases?
Smart contracts. So you can build full smart contracts on Bitcoin and Dogecoin and get those underlying trust assumptions of Bitcoin and Dogecoin, again, without having to upgrade or do these massive changes to Bitcoin and Dogecoin, which give them the same kind of functionality that we see on Ethereum. Because I'm sure a lot of people in the audience also know, like, Bitcoin is a very old protocol.
Yeah.
Like, it was the first, right? Of course. And Dogecoin is based on a fork of Bitcoin, which was made very early in the Bitcoin process. So Bitcoin doesn't have Taproot or SegWit or a bunch of these other features. So Dogecoin's a very OG, we can say a very OG fork of Bitcoin. And because of that, and just because of the way that Bitcoin is architected, you can't really build smart contracts directly on Bitcoin until now when we have this ZKP opcode. So sometimes we don't even call ourselves like a Bitcoin layer 2. I like to think of us more as like the Bitcoin execution layer or the Dogecoin execution layer, because it lets you run these smart contracts on these chains with the knowledge that the only way to break your smart contract is if you break Bitcoin or Dogecoin itself. But yeah, you get your DeFi, you get your tokens, you can issue NFTs, you can build AMMs, you can build order book dexes, you can build like everything that we see on Ethereum and Solana, and those things can come over to Bitcoin and Dogecoin. In addition, though, because we've built around this model of horizontal scalability where we batch these proofs into proofs of proofs of proofs, you can also build applications that aren't really possible on Ethereum. Like we can do 100,000 TPS prove, meaning it's not like, oh, we just have, other chains that have these big claims about statistics. They just run like one or two validators. Like, ooh, you have a centralized server that can run lots of things, just like Facebook, right? But the end result of our process is a proof, right? And that proof can be checked by anyone in the world in a millisecond. So you can build fully decentralized order book dexes. That's sort of one of the big use cases that we're targeting, that have a user experience similar to those of the centralized exchanges that we all know and love, give those users the same UX that they're used to without the risk of a Sam Bankman-Fried coming along, repurposing, giving them to Caroline or someone like that, and losing your money doing bad trading on the open market. So yeah, you can build, but even beyond that, like payments, we can do like credit card scale payments. We're talking with some very OG traditional finance players that have woken up to the crypto revolution and are doing some amazing things. More news about that coming soon. I can't reveal any names yet, but yeah. So like credit card scale payments. We're working a lot in social. Also, a big fan of Nostr. We're building some Nostr integrations. Shout out to the Nostr guys. Like they're doing the Lord's work. Yeah, so we have a lot of cool stuff. So expect everything that you see on Ethereum plus much, much, much more.
That's awesome. And you mentioned the transaction speeds. I'm curious about transaction processing fees. So a common problem with Ethereum was the gas fees. Obviously, there's a bunch of layer twos that have, I guess, semi-solved that problem. What does your transaction speeds look like? And
yeah, so I love the way you say semi-solved it, because the main problem with the way that these existing blockchains are architected is that transactions or transaction space, block space, is scarce, which means that like we can only process so many transactions per second. So the reason why Ethereum gas fees are high when they are high is because lots of people are trying to transact, and there's more people trying to transact than can be processed by the network at one given time. So the priority goes to the people that are paying a higher fee, right? So it's like an auction for who's going to get their transaction in first. With QED, since we're horizontally scalable and our block time is actually like O of log n, the additional time increase or like block time that someone occupies by the network per transaction actually decreases as the number of transactions in a block increase. your proportion of that block time decreases because again, it's a like log n. Like you can imagine a very large number, log n is a very small number. We all remember from math class. I can get like 2 to the 1,000. What's log n of that? 1,000, right? So it really drops off very quickly. So you can be expecting, transactions for a penny that again have the full security of Bitcoin and Dogecoin, where currently on Bitcoin to send a transaction, you could be paying 20, 30, $100. No problem. I mean, if we're talking about ordinals, they can get real high during times of high activity.
Yeah.
So yeah, we think it's going to be a game changer. And, with payment processors, I'm not sure how far you've gone into the CeFi space, but like payment processors are paying a few percent on each transaction. So if it's $100, you're paying a couple dollars, and we're bringing that down to basically like you can get the most secure payment transfers in the world secured by Bitcoin for processing fees that are vastly cheaper than the credit card alternatives. So yeah, it's going to be a game changer. We're very excited for our launch, which is coming soon. So yeah.
And you guys raised $6 million from blockchain capital. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Blockchain Capital is the first crypto VC. They've been in the space forever. They were the early backers of some of your favorite projects, I'm sure. Yeah, like they've always been big fans of Bitcoin and believed in the Bitcoin vision and believed in Bitcoin security. And I first met the team, I think it was at ETHCC way back in the day. And yeah, like if anyone's looking to raise money, you should hit them up. Like everyone is just so impressive. I don't want to talk down on other VCs, but like they were one of the very few VCs that we interacted with where everyone on the team is incredibly smart and incredibly impressive and also incredibly good people, which is very important when you're looking for an investor. So we were definitely love at first sight with Blockchain Capital, and they've been amazing and super supportive of us throughout the process. So yeah, shouts to the Blockchain Capital people for believing in us, and we're very excited to deliver for them.
Does QED have a token? And if so, what's the tokenomics?
So there will be a token. Primarily, it will be used to like reward people that are participating in the proving process, so that are doing useful work. We like to call it POUW, or proof of useful work, for the network. There will also be some staking components. The specific like numbers we're still working on. Like I want to shout out some of our other partners, the Bitcoin mining pools and the Dogecoin mining pools. We've been working very closely with them to make sure that we can design something where the existing Bitcoin miners are going to be incentivized and get rewarded by QED existing, because at the end of the day, we need them to guarantee the security for the network, right? Like the one thing about us layer twos or execution layers is if the layer one security goes away, then our security is kaput, right? So we need to keep those people involved and engaged. And we're working very closely with them to design, token models that are fair, sustainable, and most importantly, incentivize people to secure the network and make sure everyone's funds are going to be safe on layer two. And at the same time, people are going to be able to transact and get, very quick finality, which is what you want. No one likes waiting for block confirmation. So.
And to confirm, the nodes are going to be specifically those Bitcoin mining pools, or will there be other folks as well?
Oh, anyone can run a node. I think that's very important. Like, yeah, anyone will be able to run a node. We're just working with them more to design incentive structures that will, okay, who knows best about what incentive structures work for blockchains? The people that are running nodes, right? They know, like, okay, if you have this incentive structure, people are not going to run nodes, right? Because they're going to make more money mining this coin or mining that coin, right? So, and at the same time, they don't want an unsustainable model, because if there's too much sell pressure, then the token just becomes worthless, right? So we're working with them to build like long-term strategies and long-term incentive models that are both healthy for the network healthy for the community and healthy for the financial performance of the token.
Are you working with any of the large Bitcoin miners? I don't know if you can name drop or you may not be able to disclose
Via
that.
BTC, Ant Pool, F2 Pool are the big ones.
Okay,
And
got it.
they're like so we've been focused because I think Dogecoin is just this amazing opportunity because not really anyone is building stuff on Dogecoin, and yet it has by far, like I would say, the best community in crypto. Like in terms of most positive vibes,
Yeah.
like very, very low toxicity, like almost no like bad people. Like everyone's just very jovial and lighthearted and dedicated to the cause. So we've been working very closely initially with the Dogecoin, and because Dogecoin is merged mined the Litecoin miners to like roll that out. And also I have to shout out Patrick from who's like one of the core Dogecoin developers who's like has dedicated a large portion of his life for free. He's not compensated really at all,
Mm.
since Dogecoin like doesn't have like a traditional foundation in the sense that something like Ethereum does, where he gets a percentage of the token. No, this guy's just doing it out of the kindness of his heart because he loves Dogecoin, and he's been like super welcoming, and is helping us get a ZKP solution into Dogecoin that benefits the community. And yeah, I just have to shout out Patrick. But yeah, we've been focused a lot on working with the Dogecoin guys. And fortunately, though, via BGC, Ant Pool, F2 Pool, these
Um,
are in the top 4 miners on Bitcoin as well. So,
yeah.
shout out to the Foundry guys. We've talked with them as
Oh yeah.
well. They tend to be a little bit more, which I respect totally. They tend to be a little bit more hands off. Like they're just purely dedicated to the business of mining Bitcoin.
Sure.
So they don't really collaborate that much with other like protocols or builders on Bitcoin. They're more, and it makes sense from the perspective of there's an argument to be made that for a miner, you want to reduce outside of incentives to make the incentives as simple as possible in order to make sure like that the network is as resilient as as can be. So shouts to them. But of course, we really support via BTC, F2 Pool, Amp Pool, these guys for really engaging with us, inviting us into the community, and helping us grow along the way.
Are there plans to go to or to add other tokens such as Litecoin and other proof of work?
TBD. We're focusing on Bitcoin and Dogecoin first. I think it's already like we've been criticized by some for being distracted in our mission, for even just supporting two. But
Yeah.
I think it's very important to have two because I think like also the kinds of apps that you'll see on Bitcoin and Dogecoin, I think will be very different, right? Like
Sure.
Dogecoin will be about fun, perhaps a pump, not fun. You never know. I don't. It wasn't me. But yeah, there's gonna be fun stuff, NFTs, games, stuff like that. I think Bitcoin will be more serious financial stuff. But hey, you never know. We've got a Department of Government Efficiency coming on board. We'd love to see them post records on Doge. Shout out to Elon Musk and all of the My Doge people as well. Shouts to Doge designer and Jordan. But yeah, and Alex, of course. But yeah, like you never know. And I think yeah, that we're going to start with those two. Potentially, Litecoin is actually something that we're considering. We'll be at the Proof of Work Summit and hopefully talk with Charlie and the rest of the Litecoin guys. But yeah, that would be secondary to Dogecoin and Bitcoin.
So I have a follow-up question on Dogecoin, and this is a more of a broader topic as it relates to meme coins and the dynamic of investors and what we're seeing, right? It's like culture on the blockchain, memes on the blockchain, and different things. Bitcoin, it's kind of clear cut. Store of value, hard money, decentralized money, and so forth, right? We know the ethos of Bitcoin. Dogecoin was started as a joke, but it has become a kind of a serious thing because you have people behind the community, as you mentioned, they're passionate about it. They want to see adoption of it, but at the end of the day, it's a dog, right? A dog coin, and there's tons of meme coins. So I'm not, I don't want people to make me think that I'm trying to bash meme coins, but rather I want to get your take on this new dynamic, man, that you can almost crowdsource, fund different trends, memes, social movements. Is this the start of a new way to fundraise?
So what is a meme? A meme, it's just like what I think Richard Dawkins coined the term, right? It's just like a cultural, it's like a cultural theme or symbol that's transmitted amongst people, right? Now, there's nothing that's that different about Bitcoin than Dogecoin other than the logo is a dog. So this is not like a dog with hat where it's a token that has no infrastructure or network behind it, right?
Sure.
Like I think that's something that we do that does get a little bit misconstrued. Like this is not Shiba Inu, right? There is a network behind this. So there's proven social consensus.
Sure.
But so on another level, like the US dollar is a meme, right? It's just this culturally thing where we're all indoctrinated to believe that it has value,
Yeah.
right? Because of that, it does have value. So I think Doge is sort of like the natural sort of like taking, what's the right word? Like taking things to the nth degree, like the natural sort of logical progression of describing exactly what money is, right? Because money only has value because we all agree that it has value. Like, why does gold have value? Because it's shiny and because it's rare. Why else, right? Or like, I think diamonds are the best example because they're not even that useful, right?
Right.
Or at least the expensive diamonds aren't that useful. The cheap ones are useful. You can use them in like a sandpaper or something or as a cutting edge. But the shiny ones, literally have no use,
Okay.
right? Why are they valuable? Because they're shiny. Because someone made a commercial, diamonds are forever. They created a meme, and therefore they're valuable, right? So I think people use the term meme coin almost as like a denigrating thing, just because people see it because it doesn't put on airs, so to speak. It doesn't pretend to be something that it's not. And I think the fact that it's kind of like a joke, or I would almost say it's like more democratic because everyone realizes within the Dogecoin community. I think this is different than some other communities. Everyone is fully aware that the only reason why this has value is because we all agree it does.
Mm.
But this is the same with Bitcoin and every single other currency ever issued, including gold-backed currencies. Because the only reason why gold is valuable is because we all agree that it's shining and pretty and we like it, right? Like if gold's value was restricted to the fact that it's a good electrical conductor, it would not be as expensive as it is today. Because to make a
Right.
gold trade, in other words, you only need this much gold, right? Even less,
Yeah.
a little tiny nanogram or whatever. So like I think the Doge community is just more self-conscious and aware that the reason why this is valuable is because we all believe in it. And since we do that as a community, we realize that we have control over this thing, that this thing belongs to us. Versus, I think there is a sense in certain other communities, especially the proof of stake ones, where it's maybe a little bit true, that if we participate in this ecosystem, we're not an equal stakeholder as compared to the people that have been in the industry for a long time. Because within Doge, we realized that anyone that's a Doge supporter is part of the reason why Doge exists,
Mm.
right? Which I think is just a very different mindset. And I think it's really cool. And power to the people. Let's take back our sort of our financial lives away from those whose interests might not be in our best favor. And yeah, I think it's like the natural logical conclusion of the crypto movement. But yeah, I don't look down on meme coins. There are definitely some like people that have created these meme coins that aren't fair launches, that are
Right.
clearly designed to scam people.
Yeah.
And Dogecoin is just so vastly different than those. Like you have to do, it's a proof of work blockchain, right? It's fair. There's no like weird centralization and there's no pump and dump scheme behind it. So I'm
Yeah.
not saying to go out and buy like Mama Obama coin.
Yeah.
But you know,
Yeah. I've
there's a
said the same
difference
thing.
here.
Yeah, there's a difference. Different category with the meme coin that was created last week on Base or Solana that you may get rugged in a couple of weeks versus Dogecoin, which has been here for multiple cycle, has a community, is some merchants and businesses accept it as payments and so forth. Is a very big difference, right?
And you have to
Um,
look at the motives behind something,
yeah.
right? And also the decisions that were made early in the game. Because Dogecoin was structured as a joke, the guy who made, and I think this is the best test for any chain, including ours. You look, who has the most of this coin? Is it the person that made it or is it the community?
Hmm.
Because if it's the person that made it, then their incentives, maybe to dump on you.
Yeah.
But the guy who made Dogecoin isn't that wealthy, right? Billy, he doesn't have that much money. He's not the biggest holder of Doge. So I think you need to look at intentions and then also the actions behind those intentions to make your own evaluations. But of course, do your own research. This is not financial advice. If you get wrecked, don't come find me.
Um, Something that came to mind, I want to ask you, with regards to QED, enabling smart contracts on Bitcoin and Dogecoin. You mentioned DeFi, NFTs, and so forth. We've seen the rise of stablecoins as being one of the killer apps of blockchain, right? Everybody's launching a stablecoin, it seems now. With the QED protocol, can folks launch a stablecoin on
Of
there?
course, and we really want them to. Now, imagine if you want, because why do we have stable coins? It's because we want a more secure way to hold US dollars, right? What's the most secure place that you could possibly, hold an asset? Bitcoin, right? I would argue the second one is Dogecoin because it's the next highest market cap proof of work chain, right? So if you want to avoid the oligopolies, if you want to avoid the censorship, you've got to go proof of work. And if you're going to go proof of work, you're either going to go Bitcoin or Dogecoin. Bitcoin's downside, 10-minute blocks. Takes a while to get finality. Dogecoin, similar security to Bitcoin, also proof of work, slightly less hash power, but at the same time, 1 to 2 minute blocks, right? So if you want to issue a stable coin, you should issue it on Bitcoin and Dogecoin. And really the only game in town, if you want to get the full security, is QED. So yeah, I mean, like Tether, I think, made more money than BlackRock last
Yeah.
year. I believe there was a news report that came out,
Yeah.
which is insane, by the way. And it's amazing. It's wonderful. And we love Paulo. And I think Paulo was on the show before, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
Paulo's awesome. Also shouts to the Bitfinex guys. We love them too. But yeah, one of the really cool things again about QED is that we can do credit card scale payments. So processing as many transactions as you want to do on Visa or MasterCard in a day. Because again, we're not really capped at 100,000 TPS. It's just that our block time is the time it takes to make a block on QED, to produce a block, to produce that final proof. That scales with a number multiplied by log n, where n is the number of transactions in a block, right? So this is the same sort of like big, in computer science, we call it big O notation. But all that means is if you remember what a linear curve looks like, it's like the more transactions you get, the higher or the longer it takes to produce the block, right? So that doesn't really scale well. But with log, it goes like this, and it sort of tapers off, right? So as you get more and more and more and more transactions, it doesn't really grow that fast. So we can do credit card scale payments, fully decentralized, fully trustless, on-chain, with cheaper fees than Visa and MasterCard, let alone Amex. And if you want to do stable coins, you can issue a credit card. You can issue, any kind of, mobile payment system. Soon we're going to get, I think on Apple. Do we already have it? I know they've opened the SDK up for Apple Pay or some of the other. I think it's like the RFID or whatever it is. I'm not a hardware expert, but so don't quote me on that. But I believe we're getting some of that soon. And yeah, you can just imagine that anyone who wants to build payment infrastructure on chain should definitely come to QED. We're the only game in town that's going to be able to let you scale to the maximum potential that you really want, and that will give you a fair shot at competing with the big boys. So you should definitely deploy stablecoins on QED.
So what's on your roadmap or for the remainder of 2024 or anything you can share for Q1 2025?
For sure. So Q1 2025, we definitely want to launch our testnet.
Hmm.
Right now in the roadmap, we're adding smart contract support for a bunch of different languages. We've got Solidity, we've got TypeScript. We're working on Rust right now. So you'll be able to call a TypeScript or a Solidity contract from your Rust contract. So you'll be able to use whatever language you want. And we're also working on tuning that mobile prover to be super fast because, again, on QED, users prove their own transactions. So right now it takes about 200 milliseconds or like 0.2 seconds to prove a transaction on QED. Fortunately, again, everyone proves their own transactions, so the network doesn't get slowed down by that.
Hmm.
But we want to make sure that people can prove on your iPhone or in your web browser. So we're working on a lot of those optimizations just to make sure that the user experience you get on QED almost feels like you're using a website, which I think as an industry, the fact of the matter is that if we want to bring on more people to crypto, we need to give them a user experience that they can tolerate. And
Yeah,
what we've got right now isn't really cutting it. So our efforts are focused just on ensuring that our user adoption will be as effortless as possible.
that's awesome. Well, really great stuff, man. I love the mission. I love what you guys are doing, and I'm excited to test it out, once it
Let's
goes
do
live.
it.
I got some wrap-up questions here for you. First, if you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
I think an FPS metaverse would be super, super cool. But I think, space also comes to mind.
Hmm.
I'm still waiting. Like, we made a prototype a long time ago of a metaverse where, like, I can buy a piece of land and then I associate, like, an IP address of, like, a server with that piece of land. And then you can kind of, like, walk through this, like, open space on a road
Hmm.
and then just see what's going on this piece of land. And you could build like a full FPS or like a zombies game or like a Mario Kart type kart racer. And you can kind of look around and see all of that stuff going on. It's a little bit challenging just because like you have to like download those assets from IPFS and do like some progressive loading. But since we're working on like the stuff that we are now, we don't really have time to work on that. But I'd really love to see like one of the sort of like end game metaverses come along because I think it would be so fun. Like Roblox, but
Yeah.
good graphics and better scripting. And then also just, I think there's something to be said about the ability to kind of like look into this parcel of land,
Hmm.
see what's going on, and kind of explore like that act, like that discovery sort of path, I think would be so cool.
For
Um,
sure. I got some rapid fire questions here for you. Favorite food?
probably steak. I'm trying to lose weight, so I hope steak is relatively healthy. People say you can't get fat by eating only meat, so I'm trying it out. But yeah,
Yeah,
steak.
it's a carnivore diet, I think it is, right?
Carnivore diet. Carnivore diet.
Favorite musician or band?
Probably a Vici.
Favorite movie?
Maybe maybe Goodwill Hunting.
Hmm,
Yeah.
that's a good one. Favorite book?
Surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman.
Hmm.
You ever
Well,
read that one? You should definitely check it out if you haven't.
I actually have not heard
It's
of it.
one of the best. One of the best.
I'll definitely check that out. And when you're not working on QED, what are you doing for fun?
So I love to ski. That's my like activity of choice. I've been skiing since I was a kid. And then yeah, just hanging out with friends, KTV, since we're based here in Asia.
Nice. Carter, pleasure chatting with you, man. I'm excited for the launch and all the upcoming news and so forth. I'd love to have you back on as things progress, but thank you so much for joining
Do
me.
it. Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.